Good morning, everyone, uh, and good afternoon to those who are in India. For some time, we at SEBRI have been making efforts to understand India, its enormous relevance in the international reality. Today, we are going to discuss India-Brazil relations. In a joint statement issued during President Lula's visit to India in 2025, both countries committed to strengthen bilateral cooperation while sharing priorities across multiple domains. India is currently Brazil's 10th trade partner. Total trade flows reached 15.2 billion US dollars last year. Both countries are founding members of BRICS. Both have similar priorities at home and share similar expectations about how the international order should be shaped. Brazil has a lot to gain in deepening trade and investment connections with India. When I speak to the private sector here, I notice a great interest by several Brazilian enterprises in exploring the Brazil-India avenue. I envisage many potential topics in our agenda, namely food security and advanced agro-industry, climate and energy transition, health and pharma, technology and digital economy, defense and aerospace, critical minerals and green industry, global governance, and political coordination. The challenges of the present international reality, the recent unexpected turnaround of the world order, call for deeper discussions between the two countries. We have the pleasure to share this event today with the Global South Center of Excellence, Dakshin, RIS, and representing Dakshin, we are going to listen to a video statement by Dr. Rajan Sudesh Ratna, presently Dakshin coordinator. Dr. Rajan is a PhD in economics, master in environmental sciences, someone with a long trajectory in trade and development topics, both at the Indian government and international institutions. We are proud this morning to have with us Dr. Sushil Kumar, assistant professor at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries in New Delhi. Dr. Kumar holds a PhD in economics, has a solid research work on South-to-South cooperation topics and on India's development partnership with many countries and global economic governance. He's going to make a presentation about how India regards the future of relations between Brazil and India. We are also proud to have Dr. Mariana Albuquerque with us this morning. Mariana is a professor at the Institute of International Relations and Defense at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's a long-standing member of SEBRI and someone who follows very closely the Indian trajectory and the Brazil-India relation. So let's start by watching a video from Professor Rajan.
Good morning to my colleagues and participants from Brazil, and good evening to all of you from India. It has been a great pleasure for us in Dakshin to partner with SEBRI on doing this event on strengthening the ties and expanding cooperation between the Brazil and India and the partnership ahead. India and Brazil have played a very important role on strengthening the multilateralism. Both the countries are also participating in many other multilateral or plurilateral platforms. And India and Brazil are also participating through the trade agreement, which is a preferential trade agreement between India and Mercosur. Many facets and many issues. Both India and Brazil have a common interest, common agenda, and both the countries have championed the cause for developing countries going beyond their own national interest. This event, which we are doing with SEBRI, uh, seems for us a very important event, and we are very happy to do this in partnership with them, where the experts would share their thoughts on how the Brazil and India partnership could strengthen the multilateral trading system as well as the other multilateral or plurilateral process. Uh, Once again, I thank SEBRI for doing this in partnership with Dakshin and RIS, and we are very happy for this partnership. Wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Well, very good. I think this is a good starting point for a fruitful cooperation in the future. Dr. Kumar, it's your turn now to make your presentation about how India regards Brazil-India relations.
Thanks, Ambassador Karamaru. And I would like to also sincere thank to Marina and team of SEBRI for this opportunity to share my views on India-Brazil partnership, bilateral, as well as for Global South. As Ambassador and Professor Sudesh Ratna mentioned, this partnership India-Brazil for Global South, and in 2024, before 2024, India host G20 presidency, where India highlighted the issue of Global South, with continue by Brazil in 2024, and last year the BRICS presidency, where again Brazil also highlight the issues of Global South. What basically I'm going to present, I would like to cover two issues, which is very important. I would like to request to SEBRI team to share my PPT. And the idea of the presentation, how to this unlocking untapped potential, I would like to cover two issues, which is very important for India, Brazil, as well as for Global South. The trade and development cooperation. Next, kindly move. This is basically outline of my presentation, which I will cover this macroeconomic indicator, bilateral trade, and what are the potential of bilateral trade between India and Brazil, then the investment opportunities, and last is development cooperation. Next. If we see the partnership between India and Brazil, the diplomatic relation since 1948, and in 2006, this relation with the strategic partnership, last 20 years, India-Brazil has a strategic partnership, which is basically based on the democratic values, inclusive growth, and global South leadership. And if we see the combined GDP of India and Brazil, India is the world's fourth largest economy, around $4 trillion, and Brazil is the ninth, according to IMF, more than $2 trillion economy, combined $6 trillion share in the world GDP. And when we see the size of population 1.6 billion, and the combined GDP of India, Brazil is around 15% of Global South. And as Ambassador mentioned, India, Brazil has a strong relation, multilateral, regional, through BRICS, G20, IBSA, UN, WTO. So these, if we see the India's bilateral, regional, triangular, and multilateral cooperation, so this is the basically provide some overview of our development partnership. Next. If we see the economic profile or economic indicator of Brazil, as IMF this year projected Brazil will grow more than 4% next 5 to 6 years. And if we see the composition, three important sector where service is the important around 70% of total GDP, and industry around 23, and agriculture around 8%. And Brazil is basically leadership in biofuel and clean energy, where 90% electricity come from the clean energy. And in terms of merchandise export, Brazil rank is the second in the Latin America region. And I just mentioned the strength of Brazil is the agriculture, natural resources, and leadership in biofuel. Next. And in case when we see the economic strength of India, as I mentioned, around 4 trillion size of economy, and I am projected it will grow the next year around 7%. And this sectoral composition as Brazil is 68, India service account 56%, then industry, and then agriculture. And in terms of growing, there is a strong manufacturing and service base. Next. As Ambassador mentioned about the recent visit of Honorable President of Brazil, visit in February 2026, and India basically in joint statement mentioned the lot of sector where India, Brazil can work bilaterally as well as for global south or whole global community. The first, the effort where India, Brazil set the target to enhance the current, as Ambassador mentioned, 15 billion trade to 30 billion next 4 years. And how to expand our India's partnership Mercosur in terms of a trade, and how to boost the investment, bilateral investment in both countries. The second, the important sector is energy and climate. That I mentioned, the Brazil is the leader in the biofuel and clean energy. How to take the advantage, the Brazil's leadership on this sector, and then sustainable fuel, as well as the AI and digital. And in this joint statement where both leader signed, we going to establish a center of excellence in Brazil for digital public infrastructure. And Honorable President of Brazil participated this AI Global Summit in the month of February, where we discussed the AI governance and innovation ecosystem. And then the leadership of Brazil, agriculture and health, both countries can work together for vaccine, for medicine, how to ensure the food security, not for the both countries, for the global south, as well as the cooperation is agrotech. So this is the fourth area, fourth and fifth and sixth area for cooperation. Then the defense and security, then critical mineral, the rare earth and supply chain, where Brazil has a comparative advantage on this sector. Then multilateral cooperation, like Ambassador mentioned, the BRICS or IBSA, and Global Southwise, which India started in 2023, the first Global South Wise conference where we discuss issue for the Global South, how to tackle these issues, and then the people to people contact in terms of the scholarship, in terms of the capacity building, startup, and culture exchange. So these are the key sector where India and Brazil both made commitment. We go strengthen our partnership in this sector. Next. As Ambassador mentioned, basically what I'm going to show here, how to tap the potential of bilateral trade. Like the current bilateral trade is 15 billion, and India's export is 8 billion, and import is 6 billion from Brazil. And Brazil is India's largest partner is in Latin America and Caribbean region. And future target, like this year we had targeted for 20 billion to around 5 billion, enhance in 5 billion, that's medium term 30 billion. Next. If we see the structure of bilateral trade, India's export basically processed petroleum product, specifically diesel, then agrochemical, then chemical and organic compound, pharmaceutical, engineer, then the aluminum. Then the Brazil export to India is basically crude oil, soybean, gold, cane, sugar, cotton, and there is a clear pattern. The India is exporting manufacturing, and we are agriculture product importing from Brazil. Next. And basically, what I would like to show in this slide at beginning, I said the potential of India bilateral export. Basically, I did this analysis for 10 years. There is a same pattern last 10 years. So I for this analysis for 2024, India's export to Brazil. I basically take top 20 commodities based on India's export to Brazil and try to calculate the Brazil share in these exports in term mean Brazil import from India as well as the share of India in the world. If we see the product like petroleum, where India's export to the world is around 49 billion. In this 49 billion, the global south is 24 billion and Latin American Caribbean is 12 billion and Brazil we are exporting around 780 million and the share of Brazil is 12% in total import. And when we say the India's export to world, Brazil account only 7%. So this is the one commodity where 93% mean potential. Then the next three product, insecticide and medicaments and fungicide, these are the medical and agriculture chemical. If we see the current share where India export to Brazil is 42%. It means Brazil is 58% importing from other country. In this case of a medicaments where Brazil importing only 7% of their total import. So if we see the last column, India share, so these top 20 or top 18 product where there is a huge potential in terms of India's export to Brazil. And the overall India's export to Brazil of these commodity account 49%, which is around 3 billion. The total import of Brazil from India is 6 billion. So if we see this in other way, like the Brazil import of this commodity is 28 billion, around 20 billion, 22 billion Brazil importing from other country. So these are the some commodities, some sector where the huge potential where India and Brazil can work. Next, in the same case, like India's export to Brazil. Now, in this, where Brazil has a comparative advantage, Brazil export to India. In the same case, I analyzed last 10 years, that the pattern was the same based on this UN Comtrade data. I just explained from 2024, like the first product is sugar, raw sugar, where India importing from Brazil around 98% India's import coming from Brazil. So this is the where full potential where India is taking from the Brazil. But if we see these top 20 commodity, Brazil export to India account around 90%. 90% India's HS 6-digit, these product importing from Brazil, and out of this 90%, 30% is the sugar alone. The share of sugar import from raw sugar from 30%. The next is the petroleum oils, which account 22%. But in the share of total India's import, it is less than 1%. This is the another potential sector. Then soybean oil, where India importing from Brazil only 18%. this in total import is 13%. So around 82% India has a potential to import from Brazil, because 72% India importing from other country. Then the cotton, then the seed, copper scrap, beans, tropical wood, coffee, alloy scrap. So these are the commodity where Brazil has a huge comparative advantage. Where, as I just in the mention in the first slide, where Brazil will grow next 4 to 5 years more than 4 to 5%, and India will also grow 7 to 8%. So it very important sector for enhance the trade. As I mentioned, these commodity account around 86%. So these two tables basically what in this joint statement, how to increase the 30 billion India and Brazil trade. So these sectors show the potentials for enhance the India-Brazil trade. Next, if we see, because trade and then investment, according to UNCTAD data, in 2023, Brazil received around 65 billion FDI inflows. Out of this, if I see the cumulative FDI from India to Brazil is the 8 billion. And if we see the major companies, so these companies, basically the Indian companies in pharmaceutical companies, IT service based company and automobile. And this also reflect the India's export basket to Brazil. So these are the major company invested in Brazil. As I mentioned, the 60 or 70 billion FDI inflow. So there is another potential where Indian companies or joint venture can invest in Brazil to tap this potential. Next, in the same case, Brazilian investment in India is around 1 billion, huge potential for Brazil companies to invest in India. And if we see the major companies from Brazil, the Vale, the VSG, the Gerardo, Campesys, Dedini, Fenem. So these companies in different sector invested in India. As I mentioned, these huge potential, 1 billion. There is a more scope to enhance this investment, then our trade will increase. Next. So basically the first part of my presentation was the trade, how to untap this potential. The second part of my presentation is development cooperation approaches. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Brazil and India both are the leader in the global south. And if we see the Brazil's approach of South-South and development cooperation, which is the follow the principle of South-South cooperation, demand-driven, mutual benefit, non-conditionality, non-interference, internal issues, and no conditionality, etc. And if we see the structure of Brazil cooperation, there is a bilateral, trilateral, multilateral, and regional. So these are the basically overall the mechanism or modalities of Brazil cooperation. And if I just mentioned in the beginning, in G20, Brazil prioritize the triangular cooperation on development working group, how to enhance this innovative modality and the development assistance from Brazil to the global south around 2024, 79 country, where Brazil contribute in capacity building, scholarship, humanitarian assistance. In the same case, India is also follow the philosophy of South-South cooperation, word is one family, and the main principle of South-South cooperation. And in 2024, India Honorable Prime Minister launched this development compact, which is basically compact of 5 modality, concessional finance, capacity building, grant, trade and technology, which help to the partner country overcome their development challenges. Next, to based on this partnership, and based on the joint leader statement, there is a huge potential. The India-Brazil partnership for Global South. The first is the agriculture and food security, where Brazil has a comparative advantage. Brazil is sharing their know-how to the partner country, like recently this METRI 2 partnership, where India-Brazil, this capacity building program. And if we combine India's digital agriculture, smallholder innovation with Brazil large-scale farming and biotechnology to pass the benefit to Global South. The one. The another is at beginning I mentioned Brazil is the leader of clean energy and biofuel, and Brazil is the member of International Solar Alliance, Global Biofuel Alliance, and the blending of ethanol. If yesterday I read around the target of Brazil 35% in the petrol, etc. So this is the renewable energy and biofuel, another sector where India Brazil can work for bilateral as well as the Global South. The third is the climate and resilient infrastructure, as Brazil is the member of a coalition disaster resilient infrastructure. And if we see the Brazil assistance composition, the humanitarian assistance, and India's the first respondent for the natural disaster. So this is the another where Brazil and India work together for the Global South. Next, the fourth important sector is the human capital and skills. Like last year, Honorable Prime Minister of India launched G20 Africa Skill Multiplier Initiative, where India proposed 1 million certified train the trainer model in the idea to enhance the capacity, like the Brazil's capacity building program through bilateral, triangular, and India's under G20 framework can work in Africa to fulfill this capacity and enhance the human capital and skill. So this is the fifth area where Brazil and India can work. And the sixth is the digital innovation cooperation, like IPSA Digital Innovation Alliance. Last year, when the Brazil, South Africa, India leader met in South Africa, announced this initiative. And this year, the Honorable President of Brazil came in India, then discuss how to implement this idea. Then the digital public infrastructure, and the UPI CoWIN can share with the Global South. And then the health and development cooperation, like IPSA Fund project, at present 40 countries, how to scale up these projects, scale up these impact. And in case of health, India's affordable medicine, Brazil public health and biotech strength can use for Global South, as well as the bilateral can work. And as I mentioned in the beginning, in G20, Brazil launched this Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty Alliance. This is very important initiative for not India, Brazil, for Global South, for whole global, where the leadership of Brazil can work with the partner country and enhance this inequality, poverty, hunger, and fulfill all the SDG gaps. Next, uh, based on this, these are the I cover side by side my way forward. At present, I now would like to stop here. Thanks, Marina. Thanks, Ambassador.
Yeah, very good. You showed us a very broad picture of what's going on in terms of trade and investments. And I appreciated very much that you focused your suggestions on the areas that make sense and where the potential for future cooperation is quite strong. But let's listen first to Mariana, and then perhaps we are going to open the floor, or I can make additional comments. Please, Mariana.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for your presentation. First of all, I'd like to say how pleased and happy I am to see an event about India and Brazil happening at SEBRI. I've been studying India for more than 10 years now. And at first, it was kind of a challenge for me to convince people in Brazil of why India mattered. And now it's not the case anymore, and I'm very happy for that. Now, when I say that I study India, when I talk about the India-Brazil relationship, I get also good feedback, people understanding why India is important to a country like Brazil and why the bilateral relation needs to grow. So I'm very happy to see like more than 100 people watching us today talking about that topic, because it was like my personal and professional mission for a while. And now I'm very, very happy to see that taking shape. So I did not prepare like a formal presentation because my main goal was to comment on your presentation, Dr. Kumar, basically putting some of the Brazilian perspective into the data that you showed and into the information that you brought us this morning. So I will like organize my speech around 8 main topics and then bringing some analysis from a Brazilian standpoint. So the first one is building on the perspective that Brazil and India have a strategic relationship. And I am not talking only about the strategic partnership agreement that both countries signed in 2006. I'm going beyond that. It took a while for Brazil and India to understand that they need to move beyond a multilateral partnership. Multilateral partnership for Brazil and India is a long-term global positioning strategy, right? The two countries work together in the G77, in the UNCTAD, in other multilateral forums. In the beginning of this century, we had the IPSA forum being launched, then the BRICS, which was like a milestone for that. And then we had a very, very good experience in the G20 Troika, where Brazil and India could share some of the G20 perspective on the Global South presence in that particular forum. But it took a while for both countries to understand that bilateral relations between them need to keep the same pace, right? And the visit of President Lula to New Delhi this year was a good landmark for that. Because my key insight from the Brazilian perspective is that now Brazil understands that India is not only a trade partner. Brazil and India relationship reflects like a geopolitical alignment between emerging powers who share a lot of values. So that's my first comment on a strategic relationship and global positioning. The second comment is on the bilateral trade, because of course trade matters. We are not confined to trade, but trade is a good starting point for understanding a bilateral relationship. So if we look, and that reflects some of the data that you just showed, Dr. Kumar, if we look at the trade volume, in 2021, our trade volume was around $8.5 billion. Last year, it moved to around $15 billion, which was a 32%, 35% increase, which is already remarkable if we consider that we are still facing some of the backlash of the pandemic in the trade relations. But we have like a very bold target to go to 30 billion by 2030, which is not impossible, but it will need a lot of political will from both sides. So what can we see from that target? That both countries see that trade symbolizes for us a rapidly expanding relationship, but we still have a significant road for growth potential. So that's a focus for Brazil as well, as I know that it is for India. And what Brazil has been doing is like institutionalizing trade as an important part for the Brazil and India relationship. This year, when President Lula visited New Delhi and had a state visitor with Prime Minister Modi, we announced the opening of an Apex office in Delhi. Apex is our agency for export promotion, and that also shows like an institutional willing in making trade relations constant and, of course, expanding. So my third point will still be on the trade part, but on the trade profile. And it also reflects some of the data that you just showed, Dr. Kumar. So India exports to Brazil we have refined fuels, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, machinery, equipment. Brazil's export to India, we have crude oil, soybean oil, agricultural and mineral commodities. So what can we see from that? That we have a highly complementary trade structure, which gives us room to grow. But Brazil needs also to pay attention and not being only a commodity exporter to India. We need to increase the aggregate value of our exports to India as well. And both countries have some agreement in place to make that happen. So let's see what the next years shows us. My fourth point is on bilateral investments. You show, Dr. Kumar, and data from the Brazilian Ministry of Trade as well corroborates that. Indian investments in Brazil are right now over $15 billion, especially on energy, pharmaceuticals, automotive, and technology. But we don't have the same amount of Brazilian investments in India. So the investment flows remain asymmetric, with a lot of Indian investments coming to Brazil, but not the other way around. So we have also in our diplomatic mission in Delhi a specific mandate to increase Brazilian investments there. And we can mention some big Brazilian companies that are trying to do that. We have Vale operating in India. We have also Embraer operating in India. And last year, Tramontina, which is one of the biggest Brazilian companies, also opened a factory in India. So we are expanding there also, but let's see what the next decade brings us. My fifth point, and moving to my conclusion, is on agreements and economic integration. We have a preferential agreement between India and Mercosur, which was signed in 2003, but still we have some topics to be addressed on that. Trade facilitation remains a challenge. Tariff reductions has not also met the targets that we set there, and it's still a very limited agreement. We didn't manage to move towards a free trade agreement itself. So there is also room for deepening integration on that point. My sixth comment will be on this emerging strategic agenda that both countries are trying to expand their cooperations. And here I will mention four main sectors which I see with a good potential for India-Brazil cooperation in the next few years, especially with the target for doubling our trade relations by 2030. The first one is expanding our cooperation on critical minerals. And it also reflects the agreement signed with by Lula and Modi this year in Delhi. So critical minerals is, of course, one area in which both countries has already showed a lot of disposition to deepen their relations. The first one is energy in general, but also energy security. And here we also can comment on India's strategy to triple renewables energy, which was also reassured during COP30 last year in Brazil. And Brazil has a lot of technology on renewables energy, so that can also be an area to expand. The third one, global supply chains. And we are seeing now with this growing conflict in the Middle East, how supply chains can be affected by the lack of diversification. So Brazil and India can definitely work on that. And the fourth sector is digital technology and artificial intelligence. India has been expanding that a lot and has put digital technology as one of the main pillars of the Viksit Bharat project to bring India to be the third economy in a few years' time. My second and almost last, my seventh and almost last point is on structural challenges. We still need to work together on tariff barriers. We still have some of the food and meat products produced in Brazil with tariffs coming from the Indian side, and we need to work on that. We still face some challenges about the limited logistical integration between the two countries. And we know that distance plays a role, but China is the Brazil biggest trade partners, and they are not that far from India, so we can work on that as well. Also, we have some regulatory differences. The way the Indian market operates is quite different from the way the Brazilian market operates. So we also need to work on harmonizing our regulatory rules to make the bilateral trade and the bilateral investment flow a little bit smoothly. So the main constraints, if we look at these topics that I just mentioned, they are mainly economic and regulatory. They are not political, because on the political side, we have alignment and we have interest in make that happen. So my eighth and last comment is how this bilateral relationship opens opportunities for Brazil. We have, of course, export opportunities in our relationship with India. Iron is one example, and the opening of the Tramontina factory and office in Delhi shows how iron can be a good way to explore that. Energy, as I mentioned, not only critical minerals, but also the renewables. And the agribusiness, because we are talking about a country that is one of the largest consumers of grains, India, and Brazil, which is one of the largest producers of grains. Also, for the Brazilian perspective, we can work on investment attraction, especially on those areas where India has comparative advantages. We are talking here about technology, but also pharmaceuticals and infrastructure. India has expanding its infrastructure building capacity, and working with Brazil on that is also important. So, to conclude, Brazil and India relations are rapidly expanding, based on a growing economic complementarity and geopolitically relevant. India represents to Brazil a long-term alternative to diversify the Brazilian trade partners, but also investment partners and political partners. And the next decade outlook, I would suggest that we all focus on deepening the cooperation in energy, technology, and critical minerals. And here I will stop here and pass the floor back to Ambassador Karamuru, and thank also Dakshin for the opportunity to do this event together.
Very good, Dr. Mariana. I think that your two presentations were very complementary. You touched common points, but at the same time, you complemented one another extremely well. Let me first ask Dr. Kumar whether he wants to have a reaction on Mariana's points. Otherwise, we start with questions from the audience.
Thanks, Ambassador. I think Mariana covered the potential, the current India-Brazil relation, and how to deepen this partnership to tap the end potential. And I think Mariana mentioned all the 7-8 sectors, which is very important for India, for Brazil, as well for Global South. Absolutely. Thanks, Mariana.
Dr. Kumar, there are two questions for you here, which go beyond your presentation, but that they are interesting questions. One is, what's the importance that India attaches to trade in local currencies? Is this an issue in India? Does India discuss this point? Is this a priority for you or not? And the second point that I wanted to hear from you is, what's the level of commitment of India in terms of development of manufacturing, of the industrial sector, to the sustainable development, to the green economy? To what extent the green economy is a big point in the Indian reality?
Thanks, Ambassador, for very important question. The first about the importance of local currency. If we see the India over the time period and the expansion of India's UPI, Unified Payment Initiative, where India signed the agreement with UAE, Singapore, with Bhutan, Nepal, and with the other country of the global south. So this is the initiative where India launched, and country to country, as like your question, the local currency, how India and Brazil can work to explore this potential where India, Brazil can work in the local currency. So this is the one important where India, with the partner country. The second, your question related to sustainability and green development. If you see India's manufacturing target, as I mentioned in my slides, and the share of India's manufacturing in GDP around 25 or 26%, and the target of Indian government, like as mentioned, the clean energy for Brazil 90%. We have target how to enhance the solar energy in our total energy basket. And Honorable Prime Minister set the target to enhance the 4 plus 500 gigabyte electricity from the solar, wind, and other. So this is the one target. The another, the green finance and climate, where India is in working in terms of electric vehicle, in terms of India's share in the total budget on the green technology, etc., and how to fulfill this target which is related to SDGs. So these are the Indias where manufacturing as policy making level, both in manufacturing as well as the climate finance, India is proactively working on these two sectors.
Excellent. Mariana, a question for you. You mentioned some topics that have to be on the government's agenda in bilateral dialogue. One is tariff barriers, the other is regulatory differences, the other is how to be more objective in investment attraction, particularly for Brazil. And I want your assessment. To what extent do you think that these topics have been in the agenda? To what extent do you think that the authorities are aware of the importance of these topics to increase the level of trade and investment connections between Brazil and China and India?
Thank you for the question, Ambassador. And it's the $1 million question, right? We know what to do, but are we doing that? I would say that it's a recent move. If we looked at how Brazil and India reacted to those agendas 10 years ago, we would not say a lot of political will in making that cooperation happen. But we have some recent examples of the past 5 years, especially the past 3 years, that shows that both countries have recognized the importance and are moving towards that. We have, for example, investment forums between Brazil and India happening. We have a lot of business community bilateral and mutual visits. When President Lula went to India this year, he brought along a lot of economic and investment experts from our devoted ministries. So there is, of course, like a institutionalized agenda happening on that. And also the Brazilian diplomatic mission in Delhi, they have a person which is specialized on that. And we work in close cooperation with the new Apex office, which was opened in Delhi some months ago. So we are moving toward that direction to have concrete step-by-step plans to that.
That's good news. Dr. Kumar, another question to you. When India looks at the whole world where are the priorities in terms of trade and investment? Which are the areas or countries where India believes that the potential is higher and the capacity to produce results is more brilliant, more efficient?
Thanks, Ambassador. Your excellent question regarding the composition and the priority of India's trade. As I mentioned in my slides, India's total export 400 billion, and out of this around 70% is the manufacturing product in all the sector, either engineering, automobile, machinery, etc. At present, if we see the comparative advantage of India's export basket as well as the comparative advantage of India's economy, India is basically expanding the base on manufacturing activity in the all sector, in IT sector, IT equipment, etc. Then the automobile sector by the domestic investment as well as the foreign investment. India is also expanding the manufacturing activity in the solar, wind, all these energy, clean energy equipment to welcoming the foreign investors. To these important machinery, agriculture process, medium tech industries. So these are the sector where India's policymaker working, India private sector working, like pharmaceutical. One example, India is the pharmacy of the world. So Indian investment in the medicine, pharmaceutical, where huge investment, domestical as well the foreign investment, including the traditional medicine. So this is the one important sector. The other sector, as I mentioned, the IT related equipment where India is working, the manufacturing plant they are working, and it is also reflect in the India's export basket, where the share is increased, which was the 7% before 1 decade. Now it is around 14 to 16%. In the same case, the automobile, as I mentioned earlier. So these are the sector which are the sustainable, which are the good in term for environment as well as for quality point of view. So this is the focus under the Make in India initiative, government of India and policymaker, where India focusing, making the policy, how to enhance, how to tap this market.
Thank you. We are approaching the end of our debate. Let me make the final observations here. First of all, Professor Kunar, I have to say that I really appreciated the title of your presentation, Unlocking Economic Cooperation and Unlocking Untapped Potential. I think it derives from the fact that you clearly recognize there is an enormous potential to be explored in the Brazil-India relations. And it's a question of having priorities and doing the right things. When you talk about trade, what impressed me most was the fact that the participation of Brazil's exports in India, total imports, is very limited. It's really very limited. And when we look at a few items like sugar or for example, we see that there's a lot to do. So this participation is very small, even on items where we have a tradition to export to India. India's performance in Brazil's total imports is a little bit better, I would say, but still there's an enormous space to occupy. I think the good news, listening to you both, is that you both have a clear idea of where the priorities should be, and in terms of areas that could be more active in terms of trade, and also in ways of encouraging investments look side to side and to the kind of investments that should be encouraged. And the very good news, I think it's a point that was made by Mariana, which said that, yes, we have items to deal with. We have to deal with tariff barriers, with regulatory differences, with a number of other points. But she remarked, constraints are not political. This is a special relationship in which the political part came first, and that is a very good perception of India by Brazil, and I can imagine by Brazil in India. So it's really a question of looking at what should be done and working definitely to make it happen. Many other countries, we have the economic aspects going forward, but the political dialogue doesn't go in the same direction, and this is a main disturbance. The political dialogue coming first and being in very good conditions, we have the right environment to work. It's a question to put our hands on the real issues, on the important topics, and work on them. I am very happy with the fact that we had during this debate an audience through SEBRI, through the SEBRI webline, of 100 persons. I'm not including the persons who are connected through YouTube. This means that there is an interest. You see, this is a morning debate, and if 100 people stop to listen to what's going on in the relations between Brazil and India, it's a good sign. It's a sign that there's an interest in the air. And I have to say what I said in my introduction, that every time I visit companies in Brazil, they look at me and said, but there's India. And we always have the feeling that we could be doing more. This is the economy in the world growing at the highest levels and very dynamic with an enormous capacity to do things with Brazil. And we have to get there, and we have to be able to understand it better. I think this seminar is just a step in that direction. But I think it was very successful, both because of your presentations and because of the audience that kept faithful to us from the beginning to the end of the debate. So thank you very much, Dr. Kumar, for your presentation. Thank you, Mariana, for your presentation, for your comments and your presentation as well. Thanks to the audience, and we are going to do more. Certainly, we will. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.